As lifelong wrestling fans, we all know there is nothing better than watching a wrestling show in person. Since the first time I ever laid my eyes on wrestling, just like every other young fan, my dream was to always one day attend a show. As a kid, I would dream of being in the crowd waving my sign. I dreamed of witnessing iconic moments in person. I dreamed of being around people who didn't wear deodorant. Okay, no, not that part. And over the years, I've been able to live that little childhood dream many times. Even though I didn't attend my first wrestling show until I was 14 years old, since then I've been to 14 different shows. From Raws to Smackdowns to pay-per-views to even guys killing each other at an opera house for $20 on a hot dog, I have been lucky enough to witness a lot of wrestling shows in person. So I thought, why not share those stories with some of you guys and rank them in a video. Now obviously I'm not a green shirt guy or the Brock Lesnar bozo. I'm just a normal guy who goes to a few wrestling shows every now and then, so please don't expect some crazy stories like, yeah, I went to Wrestlemania and I sat front row and like John Cena's sweat just like sprayed all over me and it was amazing. That sadly hasn't happened yet. But yo, I've had some good times, so why not? And lastly, this isn't a ranking of the shows in terms of quality, this is just a ranking on my experience and what I had the most fun at. So it's your boy Pav, and this is me ranking every wrestling show I've ever attended. Let's get into it. And to start off the list, the most forgettable show I've ever been to, SummerSlam 2018. Now I know, people are gonna hear that and instantly start going, hey, I love that show, hey, it wasn't that bad. And you're right, this was not a bad show, it was a pretty solid show, but looking back at all the shows I've been to, this was the one where I was like, I went to that? This was the first wrestling show that I ever traveled for. I went to New York to link up with my boy Manny, and this was an amazing trip filled with so many shenanigans, from going to a house party in the Bronx and somehow not getting shot. This trip was super memorable. SummerSlam though was not. While the show was solid, the only thing that I remember from the night was it was the night where Becky Lynch became a savage. It was where she attacked Charlotte after the match and the crowd went absolutely nuts, setting up Becky's insane run to the main event of WrestleMania. But other than that, this show just never really stuck with me. It's always been a blur. Joe and Styles had a great match, but a DQ finish in person always sucks at least 10 times more. Ronda had a squash match, and Roman and Brock turning into a triple threat was cool, but it really never reached epic levels. And by the end of the night, the best match of the night took place outside of the arena, where everyone gathered in a circle outside of the Barclays Center and random people took turns hitting wrestling moves on each other. I shit you not, only in New York. Amazing trip, but in terms of a wrestling show, it wasn't anything special. Next up on the list, SummerSlam 2023, a show that just took place a few months ago, and once again, I can already see the comments ready to call me an uncultured swine for not liking the show. Listen, I'm not that stupid, I know this is a good show. From top to bottom, almost everything on this show was solid, but I think this show is a perfect example of an event that was better on TV than it was being there in person, especially for me. Going to this show, I was super excited for it. I took a 3-hour train ride with my girl to get to Detroit. I bought some really good seats. I even bought a Cody vs. Brock t-shirt at the stadium. I was really hyped for this show, trust me. But during this show, everything just felt whatever. Honestly, I think I was just too excited and I was too hyped. I expected everything on this card to be a next level banger. I thought Cody vs. Brock was going to equal Punk vs. Lesnar. I thought Gunther vs. Drew was going to be a classic. I thought the women's three-way was going to tear the house down, and while all those matches were solid, something just felt missing in the stadium. There wasn't that energy. And I just sabotaged myself by having my expectations a little too high. By the time Roman had his match, everyone already knew Roman was winning, and the ending was pretty disappointing. After 4 hours of the event, I was just like, alright, nothing felt special other than Io winning the title, and I really think if Finn had beat Seth after that great match, I would have looked back at this show so much more fondly. This was a show that was good, but being there in person, I just expected so much more from it. So when I look back at it, it's just like, yeah, it was alright. Next up on the list though, Roadblock 2016, the first ever non-weekly show I ever went to, and this was the first non-Raw or Smackdown in Toronto in 10 years. And after your boy didn't get to go to Unforgiven 06 as a 7-year-old because my mom didn't love me, you bet your ass I was sitting there on day 1 on Ticketmaster getting tickets for this show. This is the only wrestling show I ever went to by myself. Back in grade 12, let's just say none of my friends were about to spend $100 on a wrestling show, because at that time, wrestling to my friends was not even slightly cool anymore. But I was so excited for this show because I thought for the first time ever I was going to see John Cena live. That was the main reason why I wanted to go. That was it. That's why I bought the tickets day 1. It was John Cena. He was coming back to Toronto. I was so excited. Cena ended up getting injured in January.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
But I still obviously went, and my older cousin dropped me off to the show. Even he was disappointed I was spending my Saturday night as a senior in high school at a wrestling show. But hey, I didn't care, I had a great night, and the fact that I was able to see Triple H in person wrestle was definitely something that I knew that little me would have loved, and seeing Brock Lesnar in person for the first time ever is something that I will never forget. Back in 2016, that man was huge. Pause. He was so jacked that when he came out, it didn't make any sense. My eyes could not believe that a human could be that jacked. This was basically a house show though at the end of the day that aired on the network, so it wasn't anything special, nothing of value happened, but hey, it was my first non-weekly show that I ever went to, only my second wrestling show I ever went to, and I saw Triple H wrestle for the first and last time in a banger with Ambrose. I was just happy I got to see Triple H make his entrance, do the little water spit. The match being a banger was a bonus. Oh, and hey, I saw a future WrestleMania main eventer here. Regardless of it basically being a house show, nothing but good memories for this one. Next up, AEW Dynamite from October of 2022. This was memorable for me simply because this was the first time I ever attended a non-WWE show, and it was so fascinating to be at a non-WWE show. This was a Dynamite that featured Chris Jericho versus Bryan Danielson, which was a treat to watch. I'm still pissed though because they didn't play Judas when Chris Jericho came out. Instead, they played his old theme song from when he was Lionheart. I just wanted to sing the song, man. I remember Hangman and Moxley had an awesome promo battle, and MJF was sitting right above us in the crowd. This wasn't anything special, but it was just super memorable because it was such a different experience from what I was used to, and since it was only 2 hours, this show flew by. Some of the shows on here were like 4 hours long, but by the end of it, I wanted to die. This was one of the few times where after the show was over, I actually wanted more. We move on to Raw from August 22nd, 2022. It was Monday Night Raw live from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. My first time going to a Raw in 9 years, and this was such a fun time. So to put it into context, this was a month or so into Triple H's reign as a creative head in the company, and the hype and the excitement over the weekly shows at this point was very strong. And this was a show that was sold out months in advance. The crowd was red hot, the arena was packed, and what I loved about this show was there was a lot of young people at this show. There's a lot of people my age at the show. This felt like a social thing to do in Toronto where everyone just came out for it, and the main reason was the rated R superstar, Edge. It was Edge's return to his hometown. The man who retired for 9 years, who we never thought we would see wrestle again, was finally back. After his comeback, after a pandemic, he was finally back home. He was finally back home wrestling, and the reaction when he came out, it was crazy. It was as if since 2020, the entire city was just waiting for that moment. His entrance, to his attire, to him winning and hitting the spear, to his speech after the show where he says, "In a perfect world, I would love to have my last match in Toronto next year." This is one of those shows that I'm just happy I can say I went to this show, and it had amazing vibes. Oh, and I got to record this iconic video. It was a great night. Next up, NXT Takeover Toronto 2019. This was an event that I had no plans of going to. Back in the day, I used to watch NXT every now and then, mostly the takeovers, but I never felt compelled to go to a takeover myself. But the night before, one of my boys messaged me around 3 AM and was like, "Hey, why aren't we going to NXT?" And I was like, yeah, why aren't we going to NXT? So we bought some tickets on StubHub at 3 AM, and the next day we made our way over downtown, and no joke, we got our socks blown off. Banger after banger after banger. This was the night where I became an Io Sky believer, and I think when everyone thinks of this show, they think of the main event. 46 minutes, 2 out of 3 falls, Cole versus Gargano. Being in that arena, this was unbelievable. The crowd was into it for the entire match. We saw some crazy stuff, and this is the thing. I know if I watched this match on TV, I would be like, what the fuck is going on? What is this? Way too many kickouts. This is way too long. This is way too extra. This match was a definition of overkill. But being there live with my boy, jumping around and screaming with 18,000 people, it's different. You don't forget seeing some of the spots in this match and the reactions around you, and you definitely don't forget 2 people falling off a cage and going through a table. I know for a fact I love this match way more because I saw it in person, whereas if I watched this on TV, I would have been like kind of iffy about it. Back in 2019, I wasn't some diehard NXT fan, but this night was very memorable. This was a very fun night, and that main event, like I said, I liked the match. But next up, we're getting into the heavy hitters territory, and it's GCW Worst Behavior 2023. Now, I don't think anyone was expecting to see a GCW show on this list, but earlier this year, I found out that GCW was coming to Toronto, and I'd been to WWE shows, I'd been to a Dynamite, and I thought, why not? Why not go to a GCW show and see what the indies are saying these days? Now, to be honest, I just wanted to see people die. Me and my 3 friends went to GCW earlier this year, and despite the bad reputation that this promotion gets sometimes, rightfully so, we had the time of our lives. When I found out that GCW was coming to Toronto for the first time ever, I asked 3 of my best friends to come along with me. Mind you, these 3 friends are the most casual wrestling fans ever. And while one of them kind of knew what GCW was and they kind of expected it, the other 2 had no idea what they were getting themselves into. They had no idea what an indie wrestling show was like. They had no idea what to expect. This was basically like a social experiment. So all of us went downtown, we got a little hammered, and we ended up going to the Opera House where the show was held. We walked in, and next thing you know, it was just mayhem. Somehow we got right beside the ring. We were so close to the ring that we could touch the wrestlers, and for 3 hours we just saw people do the craziest shit. This was so much fun and unlike anything I had ever seen. There was so much CTE, so much carnage, and we were right there in front of them. And the best part was being there with my friends who didn't even know that this type of wrestling existed. And I'll never forget the smiles on their faces, the reactions to the mayhem, the crazy spots would happen, and they would just be jumping around, just shook at what they were watching. And the best part was we were so close to the wrestlers that we could basically talk to them. During this one match, the tag team wrestler was on the apron, and I yelled at him, "Hey, do a frog splash." This guy looks at me, does the little motion, and then 2 minutes later does a frog splash in the match. This was an amazing experience that I just can't describe. They had a bar like 15 seconds away from the ring, so you already know we were back and forth, and we were just having the time of our lives. And even though the only wrestler on the show I knew was Matt Cardona, who by the way wrestled a guy whose underwear fell off, don't ask me. It didn't matter. It was an unbelievable night. If you ever want to have fun, if you ever want to do a cool social experiment, take your normal friends to an indie wrestling show, particularly if you can find a GCW show, and you will have a ball just laughing and tweaking at the craziness that you will witness. I swear to God, this is the greatest bonding activity ever. Survivor Series 2016. Now, we don't have to talk about this that much since we really went over it last week, but since Roadblock wasn't exactly a pay-per-view, this was the first ever true pay-per-view your boy attended. Just 8 months after Roadblock, the company was back in the city, and thankfully this time I actually had someone to go with me. As you all know, I love this show. I have a soft spot for it. I was a little kid in my first year of university running a little Twitter account where I posted wrestling gifs, and I found myself at Survivor Series 2016, and there I was watching Smackdown vs. Raw in a match that had my jaw on the floor. There I was watching Goldberg wrestle. It really was surreal. It's not the most amazing show. It's not some classic 5-star event that will go down in history, but at that time of my life, this was exactly what I needed, and it really helped cement my love for wrestling. At an age where I could have easily fell out of it, this was a show that I needed to cement my love for it. That is the best way I can describe this show. A very important show for me. But moving on to SummerSlam 2021. SummerSlam 2021 is a show that is memorable for me for 3 reasons. 1, it was the night where the Pav John Cena curse was finally over. From 2013 to 2021, in a 8-year span, I went to 6 WWE shows, and none of them featured John Cena. Either he was injured or filming a movie, something happened, something came up, and just like my father, he was never there. I even bought floor seats to Wrestlemania in 2020, and that was 100% in my mind going to be the night where I finally got to see John Cena, but boom, COVID happens and the world shuts down. So if anything, maybe it was my fault. I genuinely felt like I was cursed, that me watching John Cena in person was never gonna happen, that there was a hex on me, that the universe simply said, nah bro, this ain't happening. But in 2021, that all changed. Thanks to my girlfriend who surprised me with tickets to SummerSlam for my birthday a month before this show, your boy finally got to see John Cena wrestle in person. When that music hit and he came out and he had a brand new shirt on, I was jumping for joy. I remember telling my girl, oh shit, he has a new shirt. He might actually win the championship. Yeah, that did not happen. He didn't, but just being there and finally watching my GOAT made this night for me, and that's why even though SummerSlam wasn't anything special, and on paper you can say that 2023 was better, you can say the Takeover I went to was better, I got to see my boy John Cena. It was a second pay-per-view after the COVID shutdown, my first time traveling after COVID. Edge made his entrance with the Brood music, and he had a classic match with Seth. It's always going to be a special memory in my head. The John Cena Pav curse was over, plus the surprise, the tickets for my girl, plus it was in Vegas, aka I lost all my money and went broke for a bit. I was basically bum-ass Corbin. You don't forget that. No regrets though. And it's time for the final countdown. We're down to the final 5. At number 5 on the list, Raw from September 9th, 2013. 10 years ago, your boy went to his first ever wrestling show, and it pains me. It makes me so sad that I wasn't able to go to a show during the golden years of my childhood. But despite all that, being 14 years old and going to my first ever show, it's a memory that I still hold very close to my heart. I think everyone can relate. There is nothing that can match the feeling of walking into an arena for the first time and seeing the ring in the middle and seeing the stage and just taking it all in. After years of watching on TV and not going, it almost eventually feels like something that is never gonna happen. Especially when you're young, you kind of forget about it. But when you finally get there, as cheesy as it might sound, it's something that truly takes your breath away. Not only was it my first show, this was during peak Daniel Bryan era, where that man was basically a god, where he was the focus of the entire show and the only thing that mattered. Edge was featured on this show, and even though I knew he wasn't gonna wrestle due to his neck injury, it was still so fun to see him, even if he was just gonna come out to talk. It's okay, Pav, just wait a few years and you're gonna get more than enough Edge matches in your life. This was a night where I saw Goldust come back and wrestle Randy Orton in a really fun match. I saw RVD wrestle, and I'm just happy that I'm lucky enough to say when Daniel Bryan took over the wrestling business for a solid 10 months, I was there for the movement, I was there for the cause, and I was there chanting yes, yes, yes. To everyone else, this was just a random ass Raw from 2013, but to me, this was it, man. This was my first ever wrestling show. Number 4, let's drop a bomb on him. AEW Forbidden Door 2023. I think a lot of people might be surprised by this one. People always assume that I hate AEW because I rarely make videos about it, when in reality, I just don't have enough time to watch it often. But Forbidden Door was a blast to witness. First things first, me and my boys were gone during the show. We were on a different planet, so that instantly made this show 10 times better. Not only did we see CM Punk wrestle, Sting wrestle, Bryan Danielson come out to the final countdown, that alone is worth the ticket price. But Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay put on the greatest match I've ever seen live. This is realistically the only 5-star match on any of the shows, but this match tore the house down, this match tore me down. This was an outer body experience. And I'm saying that as someone who is not too familiar with Will Ospreay. I'm a pretty casual Kenny Omega fan as well, but what these men did, yo, they should get the Medal of Honor. And when Kenny Omega basically hulked up in his home country where he was a heavy fan favorite, I get chills just thinking about it. This is a 5-star match in every way, any day, every day. And what else made this show special for me is, along with my friends, I took my little homie with me who was a little younger, and he's a pretty casual fan. He doesn't really watch wrestling anymore, and since he's younger than me, he grew up watching wrestling from the late 2000s up until the mid 2010s. And his favorite wrestler of all time is Dean Ambrose, aka Jon Moxley, and he never thought he would see Moxley live ever. But on this night he did, and his childhood dream came true, and he went nuts for when Moxley made his entrance. He went nuts when Moxley bled all over the place, and it was a special moment for him, and as a result, a special moment for me. Definitely one of the funnest shows I've ever been to. Oh, and did I forget, I saw Okada wrestle live. When I was like in high school, I used to stay up until 4 a.m., 5 a.m. to watch New Japan Wrestle Kingdom. I never in my wildest dreams thought I would see Okada wrestle in Toronto. But I did. Even though I'm not the biggest New Japan fan, I am not the biggest AEW fan. What a special night this was. Number 3, Smackdown from August 18, 2023. A few minutes ago, I mentioned how I went to Raw in 2013, and it was cool seeing Edge come out to his hometown even though he wasn't gonna wrestle. Well, almost exactly 10 years later, I found myself back in the same arena, now 24 years old, watching what ended up being Edge's final match in the WWE. This night was awesome. I don't remember anything else from this show, and you're probably like, Pav, how? It's only been 3 months. Let's just say that the bartenders at this arena really love me and my friends. But what I do remember is Edge coming out to one of the loudest pops I've ever heard and wrestling an amazing match against Sheamus. We were so invested, we cared so much, we were having the time of our lives, screaming, jumping for joy. Yeah, we were a lot of shots in, but if anything that made it better. The whole arena was rocking and Edge got the win, and I'm happy to say that I was there for Edge's last match in the WWE. If anything, it's ironic. I am the biggest Cena fanboy who has only been able to see Cena live twice, but I've been to so many Edge moments in the past 10 years, it is pretty wild. But hey, I'm down. Despite my childhood drama, I know Edge is one of the GOATs. I love him. I respect him so much. He's from my city. I will always have a soft spot for him. So hey, I'm happy I was able to be on the ride. But yeah, this was one of the funnest nights of my life. Edge's last match, me and my boys tweaking, getting Denny's at 2 a.m., passing out at the Denny's. What a lifestyle. But nah, Smackdown August 18, 2023, Edge's last match in the company was a movie, made it 10 times better with my homies. Number 2 on the list, SummerSlam 2019. SummerSlam from 2019 is a show that I don't think many people even remember. If I told you to name 3 matches on this show, you would probably look at me like I asked you some next foul math question. Earlier on this list, I mentioned NXT Takeover Toronto 2019, which took place the night before this show, and how last minute I decided to go with my friend. See, that friend was someone who was a wrestling fan. But SummerSlam 2019 was a show that I went to with one of my best friends, who I eventually went to the GCW show with, but back in 2019, my friend hadn't watched wrestling in probably 9 years. And this was a friend that I was never gonna ask to go to SummerSlam with me because I knew for sure that he was gonna say, hell no, I'm not gonna go to any wrestling show. But on a whim, I randomly asked him, and next thing you know, there I was going to SummerSlam with someone who hadn't watched wrestling in almost a decade, someone who didn't know like 80% of the wrestlers, who low-key thought it was gonna be whack, but just wanted to come along to have some drinks and just see how it was. But we walk in and the first match was already going on. It was Natalia versus someone, and I remember my friend just seeing everyone chanting and going crazy, and he just looks at me and says, this is pretty cool. And before you know it, he was just as invested as I was. From watching the solid matches to chanting along to being hyped seeing Goldberg kill Dolph Ziggler, watching Randy in person, seeing Brock Lesnar live and going through tables. He even saw the debut of The Fiend and he was super into it. He was out here recording his Instagram stories and all that. He thought The Fiend was the coolest wrestler on the roster. He was so into it, you would have thought he was the one who dragged me to the show. He was having the time of his life, and because of that, I was having the time of my life, so this show just always will hold a special place in my heart. I went to a wrestling show with one of my best homies who I never thought would go with me, someone who hadn't watched wrestling in a decade, and we ended up having one of the funnest nights ever. Every match was 10 times better, everything was 10 times funnier, everything was 10 times more epic. It was just a great night. Oh, and the best part was, we went to Denny's after the show. An average SummerSlam for everyone else, but for me, one of my favorite memories. And here we are, the #1 show that I've ever attended, to the surprise of absolutely no one, Wrestlemania 39. Despite the ending leaving me depressed, despite the ending making me question why I still watch wrestling, it doesn't get any better than this. My first ever Wrestlemania, what more do I even have to say? From the matches to the moments, the entrances, being shook at how state-of-the-art SoFi was, just everything. This was always my dream. This is the dream of every wrestling fan. Yeah, at one point I just wanted to go to any wrestling show, but deep down every wrestling fan's main dream is Wrestlemania, and I was lucky enough to make it, and in reality, thanks to your support. I went with my girl, we had amazing seats, way better than I would have ever imagined having at Wrestlemania, saw awesome matches, and yeah, it's Wrestlemania, right? Like, it's always going to be my #1. It doesn't get bigger than this, it doesn't get better than this. This could have been the worst show on the list, but the fact that it was Mania and it was my first one, it's enough. It's no doubt #1. Ray vs Dominic was one of the funnest matches I've ever seen live, and even though Cena got clapped in 10 minutes, at least I can say I saw Cena at Wrestlemania. The Cody Rhodes entrance was generational. The whole match with Roman, despite the ending, is the most invested I've ever been in a wrestling match ever. And also, it was just kind of a celebration of how far I've come with the whole YouTube thing. I put in so many hours making wrestling content for the past few years, and I started off with 0 viewers and 0 subscribers, and then became successful enough with it that talking about wrestling took me to WrestleMania. It was a very feel-good moment, and it's something that I will cherish forever. Easily the #1 wrestling show I have ever attended, and probably always will be. Cody still should have won though. But there you have it, me ranking every wrestling show I have ever attended, with a few funny stories thrown in there and some funny footage, and I've been lucky enough to never really attend a truly bad show. Cause yo, if I ended up at like Backlash 2018 or something, I probably would have stopped watching wrestling. Thankfully though, I've been pretty blessed with my luck. Wow, that was a pretty long video. If you stuck through it and you're still here, I just want to say thank you. Shout out to you. Thank you for the support. In the comments down below though, let me know what is your favorite wrestling show you've ever attended, and also let me know what is the first wrestling show you ever attended. But yeah, those were my rankings, and like I said, this is not about what is the best show quality wise. I think everyone knows that. This was just all about my experience, how much fun I had, what I had the most memories of, just stuff like that. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Much different than what I usually do, but I love making videos like this. It's so much more personal, and I think you guys really get to know a different side of me. It's your boy Pav, aka Wrestling Ifs, and this was me ranking every single wrestling show I've ever attended. I'll see you guys soon for the next one. Till then, take it easy, stay safe, but later guys.